my daughter-in-law declared war on me. I had been planning my revenge for a long time. I went over several options in my head. A friend suggested buying a gun and scaring my ungrateful daughter-in-law. But I was afraid I'd end up in jail for illegally entering her house, extortion, or threatening her with a weapon. So, I talked with other mothers-in-law like me on an American forum. They suggested all sorts of ways to get back at her. But the idea of piranhas impressed me the most. I ordered them online and released them into the pool where my daughter-in-law loves to swim every morning. If only you could have seen how hungry those fish were and how excited they got when Melissa jumped into the water. If you're watching this, grab your coffee and maybe even a blanket, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about survival. And it started the night I first met the woman who would ruin my life. My daughter-in-law thought she was giving me the gift of a lifetime, a trip to a ski resort with her and my son. I didn't know back then that the gift came with strings I couldn't yet see. One evening after skiing we went to a luxurious restaurant, where, in between delicious meals, couples circled the dance floor in slow and passionate dances. During one of those fancy dinners, while she kept my son busy twirling her around the dance floor, a waitress slipped a folded note into my hand. "I just saw her drop something in your drink," it read. My stomach turned cold. I didn't even think, I simply switched our glasses and waited. A few minutes later, I watched Melissa, my perfect daughter-in-law, drug herself instead of me. 20 minutes after that, she was slurring nonsense and giggling at nothing while my son, Matthew, looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "Do you need a doctor?" he kept asking, his voice rising with panic. That was the moment the bottom fell out of my world. The truth slammed into me all at once. I'd been living under the same roof as a predator. For months, she'd been slowly poisoning me, stealing my mind one sip at a time. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from, because trust me, this story gets darker than you think. And I promise, you've never heard anything like it before. But to really understand how I ended up at that table, switching glasses to save my life, I need to take you back to the beginning. Honestly, I should have seen it coming from day one. The warning signs were there, waving like red flags, but I mistook them for welcome mats. It all started on a Tuesday night when my phone rang. Matthew's voice came through the line, light and full of something I hadn't heard in years, excitement. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special. Are you free for dinner this weekend?" My heart did a little somersault. Not because I was imagining romance, Lord knows I'd buried that part of myself after losing Henry, but because it had been so long since my son sounded truly happy. Success had pulled him away from me. His tech company devoured 18 hours of every day, and the weekly dinners we used to share had slowly turned into monthly phone calls, then into quick holiday visits with stiff hugs and polite small talk. By Saturday night, I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time standing in front of my closet, second-guessing every outfit. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I still wanted to make a good first impression. The restaurant was one of those upscale downtown places where the tablecloths are white, the lighting is soft, and the waiters speak in whispers. When Matthew walked in holding the hand of a stunning blonde, everything clicked. No wonder he'd been distracted lately. She was the kind of beautiful that makes other women subtly check their lipstick, tall, graceful, with perfectly styled hair that probably cost more than my entire grocery budget for the month. "Mom, this is Melissa," Matthew said, his face glowing the way it used to when he was 12 and unwrapped his first bicycle. "Mrs. Smith, I've heard so much about you," she said warmly, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Her smile seemed effortless, inviting even, and her handshake was firm without being overbearing. "Matthew talks about you constantly," she added. "He's told me all about your charity work and how you practically built half the children's section of the library." "Really?" Funny, considering my son barely called me these days, but I smiled anyway and played along. Over dinner, Melissa hung on my every word like I was some wise oracle. She complimented my vintage Chanel earrings, calling them absolutely timeless and asking where I'd found them. She asked thoughtful questions about Henry's engineering career, my volunteer work at the animal shelter, even the little things, like how I kept the garden thriving on my own. When I mentioned how quiet the house had become since Henry passed, how there were days I went without hearing another human voice, she gasped softly, eyes glistening with sympathy. "Oh, Irene. May I call you Irene? You shouldn't be alone like that. It breaks my heart." Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her touch warm, almost intimate. "Matthew, didn't you mention that trip to a ski resort we booked for next month?" she asked, her voice casual but deliberate. Matthew looked up, surprised, his fork pausing midair. "Well, yeah, but I thought we agreed it was just going to be the two of us. Irene should come with us." Melissa's enthusiasm bubbled over naturally, or at least it seemed to. "It'll be perfect, just the three of us, spending time together, bonding. I'd love to get to know my future mother-in-law better." Future mother-in-law. Those three little words went straight to the hollow place inside me, the one that had been aching since Henry died. Someone wanted me around. Someone was planning a future that included me. I said yes before Matthew could object. Honestly, I would have agreed to a trip to Antarctica if it meant feeling wanted again. Over the next few weeks, Melissa and I became practically inseparable. For the first time, I felt like I had a daughter. We went on shopping trips where she asked for my opinion on dresses. Coffee dates where she listened patiently while I rambled about Henry's bad jokes and his habit of fixing things that weren't broken. Long lunches where she nudged me to order dessert and told funny stories about her teaching job that left me laughing until my cheeks hurt. She was everything I'd ever hoped for in a daughter-in-law, attentive but not clingy, sweet but not fake, genuinely curious about my life without ever making it feel like an interrogation. Or so I thought. God, I was such a fool. One afternoon, during a shopping trip to that fancy mall across town, we stopped by my house so I could grab my good credit card. That's when I noticed it. The way she moved through my home, almost reverently, like she was soaking in every detail. She trailed her fingertips along the marble countertops in the kitchen, stood silently beneath the crystal chandelier Henry bought me for our 20th anniversary, and spent an unusually long time gazing out from the balcony off the master bedroom. "Irene, this place is like something out of a magazine," she sighed, finally settling into Henry's old leather chair in the study, testing it like she was claiming the throne. "I bet you wake up every morning feeling like royalty. The light, the space, the way everything flows together, it's perfect." "It's just a house, dear," I told her, brushing off the compliment even as it warmed me a little. "Henry and I were lucky, but honestly, it's too big for just me now." She shook her head firmly, her eyes scanning every corner as though memorizing it. "No, Irene. It's not just a house. This is a dream home. Someone could live here forever and never want to leave, never need to leave." The way she said "never need to leave" made something cold stir in my chest. But I ignored it. I told myself she was probably just daydreaming about her future with Matthew, imagining the kind of home they'd have together one day. Looking back, that was the moment I made my first, and maybe biggest, mistake. We were at the department store when it happened. I ducked into the restroom for just a few minutes and left my purse with Melissa. At the time, it felt harmless. She was standing there trying on a silk scarf, chatting with the sales associate about how classic styles never go out of fashion. Handing her my bag seemed natural, easy. When I came back, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My wallet was still tucked neatly inside, my keys clipped where they always were, and Melissa was in front of the mirror now, trying on oversized sunglasses that made her look like an old Hollywood starlet. I didn't think twice about it then. But looking back now, knowing what I know, I can almost pinpoint that moment as the start of it all, the second I gave her access to my purse, my pill organizer, my life packed neatly into that one leather bag. "Ready to grab lunch?" she asked cheerfully, looping her arm through mine like we'd been friends forever. I should have been more cautious. I should have noticed how she seemed to know exactly where everything was in my house after only visiting once. I should have wondered how a schoolteacher could afford designer clothes, expensive handbags, and fine dining without blinking an eye. But I didn't. The truth is, I was lonely. I was desperate for connection, for someone to make me feel wanted again. So I ignored every quiet warning in the back of my mind. Every instinct screaming that something didn't add up. What I didn't realize then was that my calm, carefully built retirement was about to turn into a living nightmare, and the woman I was learning to love like the daughter I never had was already planning to dismantle me, piece by piece, one carefully measured dose at a time. It started subtly, about a week before the trip to the mountains. At first, I blamed stress, or maybe just excitement about the upcoming trip. I told myself it was natural to feel a little scattered at my age, that maybe I was just overtired. The first episode was small enough to laugh off, or at least I thought so. I woke up one Tuesday morning standing barefoot in the guest bathroom, staring into the mirror, dressed in my nightgown, and I had no idea how I'd gotten there. For a few terrifying minutes, I couldn't remember if I was in my own home or some strange hotel room. The marble tiles under my feet felt cold and unfamiliar. My reflection looked like a stranger. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, like a trapped bird slamming against its cage. "Get it together, Irene," I whispered to myself, gripping the countertop until my knuckles went white. "You're home. This is your bathroom. You've lived here for 32 years. But even after saying it aloud, the fog didn't clear. The world still felt wrong, like I'd been unhooked from reality. Later that same day, I ran into my neighbor Lucy at the grocery store. Lucy, who I'd known for decades, since the Carter administration, actually. Lucy, who brought me casseroles after Henry died, who still borrowed my hedge trimmer every spring without asking. She was standing right there in the produce aisle, smiling at me warmly, holding a bag of oranges. "Irene, how are you holding up, honey?" she asked. I stared at her face, familiar yet suddenly blank. My mind scrambled uselessly, digging for information that should have been automatic. The silence stretched until her smile faltered, softening into concern. I'm sorry," I managed finally, forcing a laugh that sounded painfully hollow, even to me. "I'm just having one of those days." "You sure you're okay?" Lucy asked, her voice dropping into that cautious tone people use when they're worried but don't want to embarrass you. "You look a little pale." "Just tired," I lied, because what else could I say? That I was losing my grip on reality at 68? That I couldn't remember the name of a woman I'd shared backyard barbecues with for 30 years? When I told Matthew about the episodes during our next phone call, I tried to make it sound like nothing, a silly quirk, a harmless senior moment. "It's probably just stress, Mom," he said, his voice distant and distracted. I could practically hear him typing in the background, half listening. "Maybe you just need a vacation." Then, like clockwork, Melissa's voice floated into the call. A second later, she was on the line, all warmth and honey. "Oh, Irene, sweetie," she cooed, "don't worry about those little memory hiccups. My uncle went through something similar in his 70s, it's just age creeping up on us, nothing more. The mountain air will do wonders for you. Sometimes, we just need to get away and reset." She said it casually, like it was harmless family chatter, but something about the way she mentioned her uncle made my stomach knot. "What happened to him?" I asked, unable to stop myself. There was the briefest pause before she answered. "Oh, he's doing much better now," she said lightly. "He's in a beautiful care facility where he gets all the help he needs. Peaceful, serene. He's very content there." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I should have. Because the episodes didn't stop, they grew worse. I'd find myself standing in the kitchen holding a mug, wondering if I'd been about to make coffee or tea. I'd catch myself talking to my reflection in the bathroom mirror, telling half-remembered stories and forgetting the endings. Once, I even got lost on my way to the bank, a route I'd driven hundreds of times without thinking. Suddenly, it was as unfamiliar as if I'd been dropped into another city entirely. And here's the thing that still haunts me, every single time something like that happened, Melissa would show up. Without fail, within hours she'd be at my door, stepping into my kitchen like she belonged there. She'd bring homemade soup or fresh-baked cookies, her voice dripping with sympathy, her touch soft, reassuring. "You poor thing," she'd murmur, stirring honey into my tea with delicate precision. "These things happen to all of us eventually. The important thing is not to stress. Stress only makes it worse." And I believed her. God help me, I thought she was taking care of me. I thought she loved me, like the daughter I'd always wished I had. But she wasn't helping me. She was setting the trap. Turns out, Melissa wasn't caring for me at all, she was monitoring me, making sure her little experiment was working exactly as planned. The day we went on a trip to the mountains, everything looked like something out of a dream. At the hotel, the entire place shimmered with glass elevators and polished marble floors, like a floating palace designed to make you forget there was nothing but endless mountain on every side. The grand lobby had a 3-story waterfall spilling into a reflecting pool, and the air smelled like fresh lilies from the ocean of flowers scattered everywhere. For the first time in months, I actually felt something close to excitement. Melissa, meanwhile, looked like a kid set loose in Disneyland. She bounced on her toes, clapping her hands together, her voice pitched high with delight. "Irene, look at this place. It's like something out of a movie," she squealed, grabbing my arm like we were best friends. "We're going to have the most amazing time. I can already feel myself relaxing." But Matthew wasn't smiling. While Melissa chatted animatedly with the staff about dinner reservations and showtimes, he stood slightly apart, shoulders tense, scrolling through his phone with a frown that deepened with every passing second. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked softly, touching his arm. He startled, as if he'd forgotten I was even there. "Oh, yeah. Just work stuff," he muttered, shoving his phone into his pocket like he wanted to bury the thought. "The Johnson merger's hitting some snags and my partners are." He shook his head, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's fine. I'm supposed to be on vacation, right?" "That's right," Melissa cut in cheerfully, appearing at his other side with 3 key cards in hand. "No work, no stress. Nothing but fun." She handed me mine with a warm smile. "You're just down the hall from us, Irene, practically neighbors." That first night, we met for dinner in the main dining room, and I'll be honest, it was breathtaking. The chandeliers glittered like 1,000 tiny stars, the crystal glasses caught the light like prisms, and the waiters moved with this elegant, practiced precision, almost like dancers. I felt underdressed even though I was wearing my best cocktail dress. Matthew tried, he really did, asking me about my plans for the next day, complimenting Melissa's dress, smiling when she laughed. But there was something behind his eyes, something heavy. It reminded me of the way he used to look when he was 16 and trying to hide a bad report card. "You seem tired, sweetheart," I said gently, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "Just need to adjust to being away from the office," he replied, giving a weak laugh. Harder than I thought it'd be to actually disconnect. After dinner, we walked along the promenade deck, the mountain stretching out like a black, endless void beneath a silver moon. Melissa linked her arms through both of ours, chattering nonstop about all the activities she wanted us to try, the rock climbing wall, the cooking classes, even ballroom dancing lessons. "This is perfect," she sighed happily. "Just the 3 of us. No distractions. We can really get to know each other." But something in my gut wouldn't settle. Maybe it was the way Matthew kept sneaking glances at his phone, even though service was spotty at best in the middle of the mountain. Maybe it was how Melissa's joy seemed, exaggerated, like she was auditioning for a role instead of actually living it. Later that night, back in my room, I was brushing my teeth when I heard their voices through the wall. The ventilation system must have carried the sound, because I could hear every word as if they were standing in my room. Matthew's voice was low, sharp. "I never agreed to this timeline, Melissa. We didn't talk about doing it this soon. This wasn't the plan." Her reply came fast, clipped, her tone threaded with irritation. "Plans change, Matthew. We don't have a choice now. The opportunity is right here." "This is going too far," he snapped back. I'm not comfortable with. Since when? She cut him off, her voice rising. Do you get squeamish about things that benefit us both? After that, their voices dropped to hushed murmurs, but I caught the sound of paper rustling and the edge of urgency in their tones. My heart pounded so hard I had to press my palm against my chest to steady it. The next morning, everything was normal. Or at least they made it look that way. Melissa brought me coffee in bed, smiling sweetly as if the night before had never happened. Thought you might like to start the day slowly, she said, setting the tray beside me. Matthew seemed more relaxed too, asking about my plans for the day and suggesting we meet for lunch later. But the conversation I'd overheard kept replaying in my head, and no amount of polite smiles could erase the tension I'd felt in his voice. I didn't know it then, but my instincts weren't just right, they were screaming at me, and I was about to learn just how much danger I was really in. By the third day, my episodes were spiraling. The confusion wasn't occasional anymore, it was constant, unpredictable, terrifying. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. standing barefoot in the hotel elevator, dressed in my pajamas. I had no memory of leaving my hotel room. For several panicked minutes, I couldn't even remember my own name. A security guard eventually found me 20 minutes later, shivering in the cool mountain air, my nightgown plastered to my legs. "Ma'am, are you okay?" He asked gently, his tone cautious, the kind people use when they're afraid an elderly person might do something drastic. "I'm fine," I lied automatically, forcing a shaky smile. "Just getting some air." He glanced at my thin pajamas, his brow furrowed. "It's a little cold out here for that, ma'am." I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. Inside, I was terrified, because deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong with me. The security guard's offer to walk me back to my room was kind, but the walk itself felt like pure humiliation. Every step down those endless hallways felt like being paraded through a gallery of silent judgment. Other passengers glanced at me, some with pity, some with that uncomfortable curiosity people have when they see someone else's dignity unraveling in real time. I kept my chin high, pretending composure, but inside, I was splintering. The next morning at breakfast, Melissa was different. Extra attentive. She hovered around me like a doting nurse with her favorite patient, her smile warm, her tone dripping concern. "You look exhausted, Irene," she said softly as she slid into the seat across from me. "Didn't sleep well?" "I'm fine," I lied, forcing my voice steady while my hands trembled as I reached for my coffee cup. "Here," she said, pushing a tall glass toward me. "Fresh squeezed orange juice from the buffet. It'll perk you up." Her smile never wavered as she added, almost casually, "And don't forget your morning medications, sweetheart. Gotta keep to your schedule, especially when we're out of our normal routines." She was right, of course. I'd been on the same prescriptions for years, blood pressure pills, calcium supplements, a mild antidepressant my doctor had started me on after Henry died. But lately, something felt off. The pills looked different. The color seemed muted, the shape subtly wrong. When I mentioned it to the hotel's doctor, during what Melissa insisted was just a routine wellness check, he waved off my concerns without hesitation. "Completely normal, Mrs. Smith," he said smoothly. "Generic brands change appearance all the time. Different dyes, different coatings, nothing to worry about." And why wouldn't I believe him? He was the doctor. From that day on, Melissa took over carrying my purse during our excursions, insisting it was just to help since I'd been a little scattered lately. So thoughtful. So considerate. She kept my room key, my credit cards, even my lip balm organized, handling every little detail like the perfect, caring future daughter-in-law. "You just enjoy yourself," she'd say warmly. "Let me handle everything else." But when they went off to the spa for a couple's massage that afternoon, I stayed behind in my room, lying on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, and listening to distant laughter drifting from the pool deck. And that's when my mind started racing again. I couldn't stop replaying that night, the whispered conversation through the room wall. The timeline they'd argued about. The plan Melissa said was benefiting them both. Matthew's resistance, her insistence. And then there was that story about her uncle, the one with memory issues who now lived peacefully in some care facility. At the time, I'd brushed it off, but the more I thought about it, the more rehearsed it felt, like she'd practiced that exact line, over and over, for someone else. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That I was only paranoid because my mind was slipping. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just aging. This wasn't normal. Formal night came, and the main dining room glittered like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light over tables dressed in flawless white linens, while a live orchestra played soft jazz that made every conversation feel intimate, secretive. Melissa was radiant that night. She wore a gold sequin dress that clung to her like liquid sunlight, the fabric catching every flicker of candlelight as if it had been stitched from stars. I couldn't help but wonder, again, how a teacher's salary stretched far enough to buy something like that. Or maybe Matthew had bought it for her. He'd always been generous with the people he loved. "You look beautiful tonight, dear," I said as we settled into our table near the dance floor. She beamed and reached for my hand. "Thank you, Irene. And you look elegant as ever. I'm so glad we're here together. This has been perfect." For the first time since we'd boarded, Matthew seemed truly relaxed. He laughed at Melissa's stories about her rowdiest students, asked me about redecorating the guest room, even teased me gently about my tiny navy cocktail dress. Then the band shifted into Moon River, one of Henry's favorite songs, and Melissa's face lit up, her smile soft, almost wistful, as though she were savoring a private victory. And in that moment, under the warm glow of chandeliers and the shimmer of her golden dress, I felt it again, that quiet, insidious rawness creeping beneath the surface of everything. "Oh, I love this song." Melissa's voice was warm and playful as she pushed back her chair and extended a perfectly manicured hand toward Matthew. "Dance with me?" He hesitated, already halfway out of his seat. "I'm not much of a dancer," he muttered, but his protest sounded half-hearted. "That's what makes it fun," she laughed, tugging him toward the polished dance floor where couples swayed beneath the soft lights. I smiled as I watched them, my fingers tracing the rim of my wine glass. Matthew was right, he wasn't much of a dancer, but Melissa moved with a natural grace, guiding him like she'd been born to it. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I'd been imagining everything. Maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe their late-night whispers, the strange pills, the odd timeline, maybe it was all nothing. Just wedding stress. Just me, overthinking. That's when a young waitress appeared at my table. She couldn't have been older than 25, with sharp brown eyes and a serious expression that instantly set my nerves on edge. Without a word, she opened a leather-bound dessert menu in front of me, lowering her voice just enough to sound polite, but loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "Here's the special dessert menu you requested, ma'am." I hadn't requested anything. Frowning, I glanced down, expecting pictures of cakes or chocolates, but instead, I found a folded cocktail napkin tucked discreetly between the pages. My name was written on it in shaky blue ink. My hand trembled as I unfolded it beneath the menu. The scrawled words made my stomach drop. "I saw her put something in your drink when she got up to dance. Small white powder from a bottle in her purse. Don't react. Switch glasses when she comes back. Get help immediately." My blood went cold. I looked up, heart hammering, and met the waitress's gaze. Her expression remained professional, but her eyes burned with quiet urgency. "Thank you," I whispered, barely moving my lips. She gave the tiniest nod before gliding away, leaving me frozen in place, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned toward the dance floor. Melissa was spinning in Matthew's arms, her gold sequin dress scattering light like stars. Her laughter rose above the music, light, effortless, perfectly innocent. But my gaze shifted back to our table, to the two elegant crystal wine glasses resting side by side. Identical. Indistinguishable. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I switched them. 5 minutes later, they returned to the table, slightly breathless, cheeks flushed. Melissa was glowing, her eyes bright as she settled into her chair and reached for my glass without a second thought. "To family," she said cheerfully, raising it high. "To family," Matthew echoed. I forced a steady smile, lifting my untouched glass. "To family," I whispered, watching her take a long, satisfied sip of wine that I now knew had been meant for me. 20 minutes later, I sat in silence as Melissa began slowly poisoning herself with her own weapon. It started small. She blinked more than usual, her gaze unfocused, as though the room was spinning just slightly too fast. She brushed a hand across her forehead and murmured something about the dining room being too warm, though the air was perfectly cool. "You okay, sweetheart?" Matthew asked, noticing her distant look. "I'm fine," she said softly, but her words dragged, sluggish and heavy. "It's just, the wine's stronger than I thought." She'd barely had half a glass. I said nothing. 10 minutes later, the slurring began. Subtle at first, then obvious. "The lights," she giggled, staring up at the chandelier. "The lights are sparkling. Like little diamonds, dancing." Matthew frowned, setting down his dessert fork. "Melissa, are you sure you're okay? You've hardly had anything to drink." She tried to stand and wavered, catching herself on the back of her chair. "I feel floaty. Like I'm on a cloud." "Maybe you should sit," I said softly, forcing calm into my voice while my heart roared in my chest. "The mountain air can be disorienting." She turned to look at me then, her pupils blown wide, her beautiful face slack with confusion. "Irene," she whispered, leaning closer, "did you know, the mountain has secrets? So many secrets swimming down there, in the dark." A hush rippled through the nearby tables. Diners whispered behind hands, exchanging uneasy glances. A young woman in a designer gown behaving like she was drunk out of her mind, it drew attention fast. "I have secrets too," Melissa continued loudly, her voice rising above the music. "Big secrets. Important secrets. But they're safe with me, because I'm very good at keeping things safe." Matthew's face flushed, part embarrassment, part genuine worry. "Okay, that's enough. Melissa, come on. Let's get you back to the room." "But I don't want to lie down," she slurred, grabbing his arm. "I want to tell Irene about the secrets. She should know, 'cause they're her secrets too." "Kind of." My breath caught. Even drugged and incoherent, was she about to confess? "You're not making sense," Matthew said sharply, hauling her to her feet. "Let's go." She rambled all the way to the elevator, about floating castles, golden fish, and palaces by the room. Her voice faded as the door slid shut. And then, silence. I sat frozen, trembling, my wine untouched. The same slurred nonsense I'd heard coming from my own mouth for weeks. The same confusion. The same creeping fog. Except now, I knew the truth. It wasn't aging. It wasn't stress. It wasn't dementia. I had been systematically poisoned, and I'd just watched my would-be killer swallow her own trap. I found the waitress moments later, clearing tables near the kitchen. Her eyes widened slightly as I approached. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick, cracking under the weight of it all. "I've been watching her for 2 days," she murmured, lowering her voice, glancing around. "She's been putting something in your drinks every chance she gets. I work in hospitality, I know the signs." The room tilted, and I gripped the edge of a chair to steady myself. "Will you help me prove it?" I asked. Without hesitation, she nodded. "The security office has cameras everywhere. We'll pull the footage from tonight, maybe the last few days too." As we made our way toward the hotel's administrative offices, my mind raced. If Melissa was poisoning me, what was the endgame? And more terrifying still, how much of this did Matthew know? What was her endgame? Why would Melissa go to such lengths just to make me look unstable? And worse, was Matthew, my own son, part of this? The thought turned my stomach, but I needed answers, no matter how much they hurt. Watching the security footage was like sitting through a horror film where I was the oblivious victim. The hotel's security chief, a stern man in his 50s with kind, steady eyes, pulled up the recordings on a wall of monitors. Multiple angles. Perfect clarity. Every timestamp locked in place. There would be no denying what we were about to see. There, the young waitress said, pointing. And there it was. We watched Melissa excuse herself from the table, smiling sweetly, claiming she needed to powder her nose. But instead of heading toward the restrooms, she stopped at the bar. Calm. Confident. Like this was routine. She ordered 2 glasses of the same red wine we'd been drinking all week and waited. When the bartender turned away to help another guest, she glanced around quickly, like a predator checking its surroundings. Then she reached into her evening purse and pulled out a tiny glass vial. "Can you zoom in?" the security chief asked, his voice sharp. The image enlarged. There was no mistaking it. Melissa unscrewed the cap with practiced ease, tapped fine white powder into one glass, stirred it delicately with a cocktail straw, tucked the vial back into her purse, and returned to our table with that same bright, effortless smile. "The one on the left was yours," the waitress whispered. My stomach twisted into knots. There I was, on the screen, smiling at her, thanking her, completely unaware I was about to drink poison. "How long has this been happening?" the security chief asked. "Months," I said, though the word felt strange on my tongue. "I've been confused, forgetful, disoriented. I thought it was my age. Early dementia, maybe." He shook his head firmly. "This isn't age, ma'am. This is attempted poisoning. Possibly attempted murder. We need to document everything. Now." My hands were ice cold as we rewatched the footage, but this time, fear gave way to something darker. A deep, pulsing anger. This woman, this person I'd loved like a daughter, had been quietly dismantling my mind, piece by piece. And yet beneath the fury, one thought gnawed at me. Was Matthew part of this? "I need to know if my son's involved," I whispered. The chief's expression softened, but his tone remained professional. "We'll investigate everyone who had access to you. No exceptions. But first, we need to secure the suspect and preserve every shred of evidence." Within half an hour, a plan was in motion. Calls were made, to the hotel director, the medical officer, even law enforcement. "We're going to search their room," the chief explained. "If she's been drugging you, we'll find proof, vials, fake pills, maybe even records of what she's been doing." The thought of confronting Matthew left me hollow inside. How do you tell your only son the woman he loves has been slowly poisoning his mother? At 11 that night, we stood outside their room. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. When Matthew opened the door, he looked impossibly young, standing there in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt, his hair tousled from sleep. Confusion turned to shock, then to horror as the chief explained why we were there. "Mom," his voice cracked. "What's going on? What are they talking about?" I couldn't answer. I just stared at his face, searching for something, guilt, fear, complicity, but found only bewilderment. I didn't know if I was looking at my son, or my betrayer. The security team began their search. Melissa lay groggy on the bed, still sluggish from the very poison she'd prepared for me, mumbling incoherently in a silk nightgown while Matthew sat beside her, clutching her hand. "This is insane," Matthew kept repeating, his voice climbing higher with each word. "There has to be a mistake. Melissa would never hurt anyone, especially not my mother." But the evidence didn't care about his protests. In a hidden compartment beneath her lingerie, they found 3 small glass vials filled with clear liquid, labels carefully peeled away. "What are these?" the chief demanded, holding them up with latex-gloved hands. Melissa blinked, trying to focus. I don't know what those are." "Then why are they hidden in your suitcase?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Nothing." And then came the worst discovery of all. They pulled out a prescription bottle identical to mine, same pharmacy label, same dosage, same everything, but inside were different pills. "She's been swapping out your real medication," the security chief said grimly, showing me the counterfeit pills. I felt my knees go weak. My entire world tilted on its axis. "We'll need to send these vials to a lab," the medical officer said, carefully placing them into an evidence bag. "But based on your symptoms, I'd bet they're designed to cause exactly what you've been experiencing: confusion, memory loss, cognitive decline." Matthew stared at the evidence, his face pale and hollow, his emotions flickering between disbelief, anger, and dawning horror. "Melissa," his voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "What is this? What have you done?" She turned her unfocused gaze toward him, her beautiful face slack, pupils dilated, lips parted as if searching for an answer she didn't have. It's not what it looks like," she slurred, her words sticky and tangled. "Then what is it, Melissa?" he snapped, his voice sharp with desperation. But there was no explanation. None that could justify vials of unidentified drugs, swapped medications, and months of orchestrated confusion. And then came the real gut punch. The security team found her tablet. When they unlocked it, a gallery of hidden videos filled the screen, videos I'd never known existed. Dozens of them. The chief tapped the first one, and suddenly, there I was. I watched myself stumble through my own kitchen, looking lost and frightened, as if I didn't recognize my own home. Another video showed me mid-conversation on the phone, words dissolving into incoherent fragments. In another, I was in a grocery store, swaying on my feet, glassy-eyed and confused, while Melissa's voice behind the camera said softly, "See? This is what I'm dealing with." I wanted to be sick. "She was building a case," the security chief said quietly. "Documenting a pattern of mental decline. This isn't random poisoning. She wanted you declared legally incompetent." The pieces clicked together with horrifying precision. She wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was erasing me. She wanted control. My finances. My home. My future. Maybe even to have me tucked away in a care facility while she smiled sweetly and drained everything I'd worked for. The medical officer examined my prescription bottles, turning them over in gloved hands. "Tampered," he confirmed grimly. "Your real pills were replaced. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. These substances cause confusion, disorientation, even mimic early-onset dementia." I felt like I'd been punched. "How long?" the doctor asked gently. "Months," I managed, my voice shaking. "Maybe since the day we met." As they prepared to move Melissa to the holding room until we docked, I turned to Matthew. The question had been clawing at me for hours, but saying it out loud nearly broke me. "Did you know?" His eyes filled instantly, tears spilling down his cheeks as he shook his head violently. "Mom, no. I swear to you on Dad's grave. I had no idea. I thought," his voice cracked, and he pressed his hands to his face. "God, I thought you were just getting older. Forgetful. I thought Melissa was helping you. Taking care of you." I wanted to believe him. Desperately. Every instinct in me screamed to protect my son, to trust him like I always had. But trust, once it shatters, it never fits back together the same way. "The arguments," I said softly. "The distance. The stress between you two." He looked at me with raw pain in his eyes. "I was worried about you, Mom. Melissa kept saying maybe you needed professional help, maybe you weren't safe living alone. She made it sound like she cared." I realized then just how deep her manipulation ran. She'd weaponized his love for me, turned his concern into ammunition. She'd made him part of the plan without him ever realizing it. But a whisper of doubt still lingered, cold and sharp. By morning, we were docked in Deer Valley. Real police officers entered the hotel with calm, methodical efficiency. Within minutes, Melissa was in custody, no longer foggy, fully aware that her carefully built life was crumbling. I sat in a conference room with Detective Maria Blackwood, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s whose no-nonsense energy filled the room. Technicians moved around us, photographing evidence and taking statements, but all I could hear was my own pulse thundering in my ears. We ran Ms. Alvarez's fingerprints through our database as soon as the hotel's security contacted us, Blackwood said, flipping open a thick folder. What we found is disturbing. She spread a stack of photos across the table, mugshots, driver's licenses, blurry surveillance stills from security cameras. Melissa Alvarez isn't her real name, Blackwood said flatly. She's Melissa Bennett. She has a criminal record stretching back 7 years, fraud, identity theft, elder abuse. She's made a career out of targeting wealthy older individuals. I felt the blood drain from my face. There've been others, Blackwood continued. At least 3 we know of. She slid another photo across the table, a smiling man in his 60s. William Miller. Successful contractor from New York. Married Melissa 2 years ago. Died 8 months ago, apparent heart attack after what was described as severe food poisoning. Matthew went pale. She told me she'd never been married, he whispered, almost to himself. She inherited nearly $400,000 from Miller Estate, Blackwood continued, plus his home. His children contested the will, claiming their father had been showing sudden signs of cognitive decline that didn't match his medical history. The pattern was undeniable. And it got worse. A wealthy uncle, Blackwood said, flipping to another photo. Edward Bennett. Melissa was his caregiver. 3 years ago, he was committed to a psychiatric facility after displaying rapid-onset dementia symptoms. My stomach churned violently. Is he? I swallowed hard. Is he still alive? Very much so, the detective said grimly. But his finances are entirely under her control. And according to his doctors, Detective Blackwood said, sliding another report across the table, his so-called dementia has improved dramatically since he was moved to a different care facility and placed on proper medications. They're questioning his original diagnosis. My throat went dry. So, she's done this before, I murmured, though it wasn't really a question. Blackwood nodded grimly. We believe Melissa has been perfecting this technique for years. She targets wealthy, often older individuals, usually people with adult children living far away. She gains their trust, slowly poisons them to trigger signs of cognitive decline, then positions herself to either inherit their assets when they die or takes legal control when they're declared incompetent. Matthew was pale, trembling, his fists clenched so tightly on the table his knuckles had gone white. If she could do this to my mom, his voice cracked. What was she planning for me? The detective met his eyes with a measured, sympathetic gaze. Based on her established pattern, she said gently, you were next, Matthew. Once your mother was committed or gone, you would have been vulnerable. A tragic accident, maybe. A bad reaction to medication. A car crash. Something subtle, something quiet. She would have ended up your widow, and the sole heir to both your assets and your mother's estate. The sheer scale of her cruelty hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't just been stealing from me. She was erasing me. Destroying my mind, dismantling my relationship with my son, plotting his death, and walking away with everything we'd built, only to start again with another unsuspecting family. We're reopening the investigation into William Miller's death, Detective Blackwood continued. And we'll be reviewing Edward Bennett's case as well. Honestly, Mrs. Smith, she looked me straight in the eye. By switching those wine glasses, you may have saved not only your life, but prevented future murders. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. What happens now? Melissa Bennett, Blackwood said, her voice sharp and unwavering, will be charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Given the evidence and her history, she's looking at 25 years to life. Her uncle will be moved to proper care, his finances fully investigated, and you, Mrs. Smith, her expression softened slightly. You'll need extensive medical evaluation to understand what she's been giving you and the potential long-term effects. Later, when they led Melissa off the hotel in handcuffs, she glanced back at me one last time. Her face was no longer slack or confused. She was perfectly composed, her beauty almost unnerving now that I understood what hid beneath it. She called out to me, her voice carrying that same syrupy sweetness she'd used when bringing me tea and sympathy. "I really did care about you, Irene. You have to believe that." But I didn't believe it. Because someone who truly cares for you doesn't methodically dismantle your sanity. They don't turn your own son into an unwitting pawn in your destruction. And they certainly don't plan your death while holding your hand and calling you family. The medical tests in Deer Valley were brutal. Extensive. And the results were horrifying. Dr. Emma Carpenter, a toxicologist with tired eyes and a steady voice, sat across from me as she went over the findings. "The substance Melissa was giving you," she explained, "was a sophisticated cocktail of drugs designed to cause cognitive impairment, memory lapses, confusion, and it was engineered to avoid detection in standard blood work. It wasn't amateur work. This required pharmaceutical knowledge and precise dosing," she continued. "Too little, and you'd barely notice. Too much, and you'd die before her plan could unfold. You're extremely lucky you caught this when you did. Another few months of systematic exposure, and the cognitive damage could have been permanent, even irreversible. The drugs were cumulative, each dose building on the last. It explained why my symptoms had crept in so insidiously, worsening with time until I'd started doubting my own mind. And all the while, she'd been there, smiling, caring, making me believe she was my protector. Underscore 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 underscore. Matthew stayed with me through the entire medical ordeal. He brought me magazines, held my hand during blood draws, and sat with me while the toxicology reports came in. But guilt had settled into him like a shadow he couldn't shake. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," he said one afternoon, his voice low as we watched the Deer Valley skyline glitter beyond my hospital window. "The way she always wanted to know about your finances. How she insisted on coming to your doctor's appointments. How she knew more about your medical history than I did. You couldn't have known," I told him softly, though deep down, I was still untangling my own feelings about his part in all of this. "She was good at this, Matthew. Professional." His jaw tightened. "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." His voice cracked, raw and heavy with shame. "She even suggested we get you evaluated for dementia last month. Said it would be better to catch it early, to get you help." He covered his face with his hands. "I thought she was being caring. Responsible. But she hadn't been caring. She'd been calculating. Always 2 steps ahead." When the police investigation concluded, the scale of Melissa's deception was staggering. She hadn't stumbled into our lives by accident. She'd researched us for months, my finances, my medical history, Matthew's work, our routines, before orchestrating that chance meeting with my son. None of it was coincidence. She'd planned everything. She was fully aware of my wealth, my loneliness following Henry's death, and my deep desire to be closer to my son. She had carefully observed my habits, identified my weaknesses, and fashioned a persona aimed precisely at fulfilling what I longed for most, a devoted daughter figure to help bridge the distance between Matthew and me. "The plan was to have you declared legally incompetent and committed to a care facility," Detective Blackwood explained during a follow-up visit. "She intended to move into your home as Matthew's wife, gradually cut him off from friends and colleagues, and then something would happen to him as well, perhaps a car accident or a sudden illness, leaving her as the sole heir to both your estates. It was a meticulously orchestrated, year-long scheme designed to dismantle my family and seize everything we had worked for. Yet she had overlooked one vital element, a perceptive waitress with the courage to intervene. Melissa Bennett was sentenced in prison for attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, and a multitude of additional charges. Her uncle Edward was relocated to a reputable care facility and began slowly regaining his health with proper treatment. Authorities also reopened the investigation into her previous husband's death, confident that they would uncover enough evidence for new charges. During my recovery, Matthew moved back home and never left. He converted Henry's old study into a home office, reduced his work hours significantly, and we resumed sharing dinners each night, just as we had when he was a boy. "I almost lost you," he said one evening as we sat on the back patio, watching the sunset streak the sky with gold and pink. "I'm never taking that risk again. Business can survive without me micromanaging every detail, but I couldn't survive losing you." Our bond had never been stronger. The ordeal stripped away years of formal distance and forced us to confront how deeply we cared for each other. We reminisced about Henry, reflected on lost opportunities, and planned for the future we wanted to build together. Within a few months, I felt like myself again, sharp, independent, and perhaps a bit more cautious about whom I trusted. But I refused to let bitterness or paranoia take hold. Life was far too precious to squander on negative emotions. I had discovered that I was far stronger and more resilient than I had ever imagined. Each morning, waking in my beautiful home, I felt profound gratitude, not only for comfort and luxury, but for the mental clarity to truly appreciate them, for my son's love and presence, and for the second chance I had narrowly escaped from a predator's greed. The woman who tried to destroy my life had inadvertently given me a priceless gift instead, the knowledge that I could endure anything, and that sometimes those who seek to harm you end up defeating themselves. Melissa had dreamed of living in my house forever, surrounded by all the treasures Henry and I had collected over the years. I don't know how my sister-in-law managed to escape punishment. She got out of prison on bail and disappeared. I hired a detective to find her. I decided it wouldn't be fair to let her go unpunished. So when the detective found out where she lived, I bought a bag of piranhas and released them into the pool where she swims every morning. I don't know how my daughter-in-law managed to escape punishment. She got out of prison on bail and disappeared. I hired a detective to find her. I decided that it would not be fair to let her go without punishment. So when the detective discovered where she lived, I ordered a bag of piranhas and released them into the pool where she swam every morning. The next sunrise, I watched from a safe distance, binoculars in hand, as Melissa approached the pool in her bright pink swimsuit, humming a tune as if nothing had happened. She dipped her toes in, ready for her usual swim. That's when the piranhas, small but surprisingly agile, began to glide through the water like little underwater torpedoes. Melissa squealed, jumping back onto the deck, her towel fluttering in the wind, while the piranhas chased imaginary prey near the shallow end. The scene looked like a bizarre comedy sketch, her flailing arms, the splashing water, and the tiny fish circling hungrily without harming a single soul. Neighbors peeked over the fence, curious about the commotion, and I had to hide behind a bush, stifling my laughter. After 10 minutes of controlled chaos, I called the detective, who helped me remove the fish safely from the pool. Melissa was soaking wet, drenched, and utterly humiliated, but alive and unharmed. She glared at the empty pool, realizing she had been outsmarted. I didn't need to say a word, the message was clear. She had attempted to poison me once, and now she'd learned the hard way that I could outwit her in ways she hadn't imagined. The piranha episode became legendary in the neighborhood. Melissa never swam there again, and I got a quiet satisfaction from knowing justice had been served, with humor, cunning, and zero fatalities. What do you think of this story? Have you ever met someone who seemed too perfect, who paid just a little too much attention to your private affairs? I'd love to hear about it. Share your experiences in the comments below. Thanks for listening, don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story. Your voice matters.